Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in the Mojave Wasteland with some weirdly, sometimes invisible puddle of water. I don't really know what is going on there, but the game's having a bit of a moment. There's also a few Legion assassins lying around, and you can see Dinky the dinosaur over in the distance there. So today, to follow up on last week's video, which covered the Rad-Rats that you find in Nuka World and Fallout 4, I thought it was time we addressed the giant rats, which are found in New Vegas and are similar to the giant rats that you encounter in the original Fallout game as well. So we're here at Brockflower Cave. So if you've never been here before, it's kind of right here. So Cottonwood Cove's over there, Camp Searchlight's down here. So it's near the Legion Raid camp where you would go if you do the quest Booted to rescue a couple of powder gangers from the Legion, and then Wolfhorn Ranch here, Nipton. So that's where we are on the map, and you can tell we're at Brockflower Cave. There is Brockflowers everywhere, as well as this radioactive puddle that sometimes exists and sometimes doesn't. So Schrodinger's puddle, but yeah, there's lots of Brockflowers here. But up here, if we follow this path that looks like it shouldn't really be climbable, but obviously it is, we are heading into Brockflower Cave. So this is the best place to find the giant rats, but you do find them in sewers, you find them in underground locations and caves, anywhere that's dark, and you also tend to find them inside abandoned buildings and things, which obviously in the Fallout universe there's plenty of those. So just made a manual save. The reason for that is that there's a bit of a different outcome in this place if you have Wild Wasteland, so I want to show what happens with both. So let's head inside the cave. Of course, as always, I've always got combat turned off and everything, just because it lets us get a better look at the creatures when they're not trying to bite my face. But you can kind of hear them creeping around, and you make your way down. So the giant rats are obviously bigger than your normal rats. There's one there. Hello. So they do have kind of blue glowing eyes, and you can see, let's put some light on this guy, hopping around and things, which is a behaviour that rats do. These guys have obviously got massively elongated incisors, but you can still see whiskers, and they've kind of got a strip of hair along their spine, which is still there, but the rest of their body is hairless, massive claws, and they've got these kind of dark spots along their skin, very similar to what you see on the mole rats, and then their long hairless tails, which is obviously a normal feature of the species. So the likelihood is that these guys, they're a bit different from the East Coast Rad-Rats that we saw in Nuka World, but they are most likely to have also mutated from the brown rats, which is Rattus norvegicus. And this is the species of rat that's found in every continent except Antarctica. And they're found pretty much everywhere. So I went into a lot of detail in the Rad-Rat video, which I'll link above for you, so that you can check that out if you're interested in getting some more details. But I'll give you a recap of the kind of most important notes about them. So rats are part of the murymorph rodent family, which is the sort of mouse-like rodents. They're omnivores and they will eat just about anything. They also can reproduce very quickly, so a population from 2 rats can become 15,000 in the space of a year. So that's something that they are very efficient at, almost as efficient as rabbits are in that sense. They're very adaptable animals, so they can adapt to live in just about any environment. So, you know, they are found in urban environments and they make themselves right at home, but you can also find them in, you know, rural environments. You can find them quite commonly around wilderness as well, so they will live on just about anything and live in just about any location. So they've made themselves at home in this cave, and obviously it's full of radioactive barrels and things as well, and glowing fungus. yeah, you can hear them kind of squeaking and things. That's actually fairly close to the noises that real rats make, especially when they're feeling a bit stressed or a bit, you know, if they're in pain, they tend to squeak and things. They make noises, so it's, yeah, just about right, I think. Trying to find if there's a way to get up to another level, because there's a unique weapon in this cave. Hello. So yeah, be warned, this cave is radioactive, and the rats that are in this cave are actually more dangerous than the ones that you'll encounter in the sewers. But you can see somebody at some point has set up a little camp here, and I've got a couple of ratty boys hanging around, so they're obviously a lot bigger than the normal ones. What's that? Programmer's Digest. So yeah, so rats are notorious for carrying diseases, including leptospirosis, which you might know of as Weil's disease, which is quite a serious infection. The bacteria is shed in the urine of the rats, so if they pee on food, if they pee on things, then that is a risk of transmission, or if it gets into the water. And leptospirosis is very serious in humans and in dogs as well, so is something to bear in mind if you're a dog owner. Getting your dog vaccinated against leptospirosis is wise, because it is a very serious illness when dogs get it as well as humans. And obviously the one that's most famous is the Black Plague, the Bubonic Plague, the Black Death. It's got many names, and the organism that causes that is called Yersinia pestis, and rats were obviously notorious in the transmission of that in the past. They have also been long domesticated for a number of reasons. So they're a very common model organism in laboratories, so they use rats to study all kinds of things, from medical research to psychology, training, operant conditioning, all that kind of a thing. So they use rats for a lot of these things. They're also trained to sniff out explosives and can be very useful in minefields for finding hidden mines and things like that. And of course they do make for really good pets as well. They're very fast learners, they're clever, and they like companionship as well. They're very good at climbing, they're very good at swimming, they're very good at digging, and they do dig quite extensive burrows when they're living in the wild. And they do seem to enjoy puzzles and games, and scientists have even taught them how to play hide and seek, which apparently they seem to really enjoy. So, you know, they can learn, they can be trained, they're quite clever. In terms of their senses, their hearing and their sense of smell is really good, and they've got these long whiskers which help them to navigate in the dark. Their eyesight isn't great, they're red-green colourblind like a lot of non-human mammals are, but they can see into the UV spectrum, but their actual eyesight isn't really very good, so they rely on their hearing and their sense of smell, and on the whiskers, which are basically specialised hairs that are connected directly to a nerve, so it allows them to detect things around them, changes in the air, and helps them navigate their tunnels when they can't see very well. So that's kind of how they navigate the world. Their hairdo is great. But I'll put a little photo on the screen here of my two girls, Button, who's the one that's grey and white, and Smudge, who's kind of brown and cream. So these were two rats that I took on as rescues a few years ago. I had them for not quite a year, but they were both over the age of 2 when I got them, and lifespan of domestic rats is generally about 2.5 to 3 years. It's quite rare to see them get much past 3 years of age. Unfortunately, they do have quite short lifespans. But the two girls that I had were, Button actually had to have an eye removed. She had a tumour on her eyelid, so I had to do surgery to remove that, and we had to remove her eye because the tumour was going to take up too much eyelid for it to be safe to leave the eye in place, and it was affecting her eyes, so we had to take that. But she never let it slow her down really, and they were absolutely the sweetest little things. They were always up to the front of the cage for a treat before bedtime, and they just loved cuddles and things, so they were really, really good. and they can make very nice pets, so they are pets that I would recommend, and I have treated many of them in my career as a vet as well, so very, very fond. I really like this little hoppy thing that they're doing, that's really funny. So the giant rats here, I've got the largest incisors. They're obviously much bigger than their pre-war counterparts. The standard giant rats are defensive, so they tend not to attack unless you get too close or you attack first. But if you have animal friend, then it does apply to them, so they will be friendly in that case. Although typically in Fallout New Vegas, I don't think there's many people that have their charisma stat high enough to take animal friend, but it is potentially an option. And I say they're found in dark places, sort of underground and things, just like in the real world, so they tend to stay out of sight during the day. So you'll find them in caves, you'll find them in the sewers, you'll find them in old buildings and things like that as well. And even some of the abandoned vaults. So you do come across the giant rats alongside the giant mantises if you go exploring in Vault 11. Although they do fight each other, I think, and they'll also often stumble into some of the traps that are in that vault, so sometimes when you get there they're already dead because they've walked into a trap or something like that. But you do tend to find them in groups, usually sort of 3 to 7. Probably that depends a little bit on your level and where you are. But the ones that are here are more dangerous, they're tougher, they've got higher defense stats and things in comparison to the ones that you find elsewhere. So that's the kind of interesting thing. And you can tell somebody has set up here because we've got loads of medical supplies. We have got Programmer's Digest, we've got some science equipment, lots of tins. So somebody has stayed in here for quite some time, and probably these guys have raided all their food supplies, and that's why they're here. But there's a unique weapon that's in this place, as well as some more Radaway and stuff, and that is the Rat Slayer. So the Rat Slayer is a unique variant of the varmint rifle, which is one of the first weapons that you would typically acquire. So the Rat Slayer, in comparison to your standard varmint rifle, has a lighter weight, so it only weighs 4.5, and it has kind of higher DPS. It also, like a lot of the unique weapons, has a higher critical hit multiplier, and it also has all the mods that you can buy and add to your standard varmint rifle. So you've got the extended magazine, the silencer, and the night scope as well. And it's black. You can see the not the clearest, but there is on the stock there is a rat skull, and there's also tally marks which add up to 69. And that's presumably a tally of how many rats have been killed with this gun. But yeah, it's got your night scope, it's got your extended magazine, and it's got the silencer as well. So it is actually a really good weapon for kind of mid-game, because these rats are quite dangerous if you're a really low level. But once you kind of get to this point where you're able to handle like Camp Searchlight and things like that, then you should be able to handle this, and then you get this weapon as your reward. So yeah, these guys are hopping about. So what we're going to do is we're going to change things around a little bit so that we can look at the difference in this place if you have the Wild Wasteland trait. Because things are a wee bit different when you come in here, so bear with me and I'll be back with you in just a minute or two. There we go. So if you've played with Wild Wasteland before, you know what that sound means. It's telling me that, oh, there's something here that is changed because you've got the Wild Wasteland trait. So now we're back to where the Rat Slayer is, and if we... So we've got the rodent of unusual size. So these are bigger even than the mutated giant rats and the most dangerous. So you can see they've got 125 hit points and they do a lot more damage. They are also more aggressive and will attack you as soon as they see you. Yeah, look at the size of that absolute unit. And you generally find them here, and you can find them in the sewers on occasion, maybe Vault 11, but they only appear if you have the Wild Wasteland trait active, so yeah. That's it, so yeah, you can see, I mean, you're doing a bit of levitating there, which is quite impressive, but yeah, they're much bigger and much more aggressive, and actually this might give us a better look at the stock. So let's see if I've got a scoped weapon. I don't think I do. There we go. So yeah, you can see there's the mole rat skull and then all the tally marks on the stock of this gun, the Rat Slayer. So yeah, if you have Wild Wasteland on, it's even tougher to get to the Rat Slayer because these rats are bigger, scarier and more aggressive. And you possibly know that these rodents of unusual size, it's a reference to The Princess Bride, which is a film, and if you talk to Lady Jane, who you can find in Freeside, she'll ask about them because her caravan basically got lost here at this cave. She'll ask you about them, and then you can reply with rodents of unusual size, I don't believe they exist, which is a direct quote from the film about dealing with giant rats. So that's something that I think is quite entertaining. It's also, you can see that there is like little burrows into the rock and stuff here that you can't get into, but presumably the rats can, because while they are of unusual size, you're still bigger than they are, so it should still be possible in theory for you to for them to get into these burrows that you can't follow. But yeah, pretty interesting. But there is one more variety that you can find, which is elsewhere in the Mojave. So, okay, we are back and we're down here in the sewers. This is the entrance that's right in front of Camp McCarran, which is why these NCR troopers are here blocking the way through. Get out of the way, guys. Put this light on so we can see better. So there is quite an extensive sewer network under New Vegas, and oh look, there's some giant rats. So these are some more of the standard ones, although they are a bit weaker than the ones that we saw in Brockflower Cave, but their behaviour and everything is pretty much exactly the same. Hello. So, but if we head in here, this is the East Central Sewers. There is ghouls as well. Here we are. So it took me a wee minute to find it, but there is a room in the East Sewers. It's guarded by some ratties and a couple of feral ghouls. So on the local map, I'll show you. So that's the door through to the Central Sewers, and then you can come down here and there's a door it's not locked. But you come in and you find this lady here, Sweet Jill. She has a key and a couple other random bits and pieces on her person. And then we find some skeletons and giant rat pup. But we also have these guys. So we've got unnaturally large sized rodents. So these appear if you don't have Wild Wasteland. There's also some stuff in that. There's also a couple of giant rat pups, which apparently we can't get in here. Interesting. Okay, yeah, apparently we can't fit through there, but the rats can. Interesting. So yeah, we've got giant rat pups. So they're quite a bit weaker and obviously smaller. But then you've got these unnaturally sized rodents, which I can't even seem to get on the screen. Their hit points. The hit points are 70, so they're not quite as tough as the rodents of unusual size. or the giant rats that you find in Brockflower Cave if you don't have Wild Wasteland, but they're obviously a lot bigger and tougher than the kind of standard variety that you find kicking around. They act like the normal giant rats, so there's not much difference in them other than obviously size. So it's obviously a bit of a reference as well to the rodents of unusual size, so it's all part of the same kind of inside joke, if you will, to do with the Princess Bride movie and novel. So yeah, there we go, there's some more rats as well. So unsurprisingly, in the sewers you find lots of rats, same as you do in real life. They tend to hang around in sewer systems, underground train systems. I've definitely seen rats on the lines and on the stations in London before now. I would assume it's the same for any subway system, like you know, the one in New York, that kind of thing. But the rats are here, and they're a bit different from their East Coast cousins. But again, they make an interesting addition, and it's quite logical that, you know, rats would survive because they do seem to be quite tough little creatures that can adapt to just about any environment. They can eat just about anything, so their food options aren't limited like some other species might be. So it kind of makes sense that they would potentially do quite well in the post-apocalypse, similar to, well, your rad roaches and that kind of a thing. So yeah, that's the giant rats. So we're running low on creatures to talk about now, actually. There's really only the sort of birds that we want to talk about. I know we've talked about the rad chickens, but there's... So you've got the crows that are in Fallout 4, which would be an interesting conversation. You've got the ravens in Fallout New Vegas, and then in Fallout 4 there's also rad gulls, so we'll be tackling them at some point. And then the tunnelers from Lonesome Road would be the final thing. They're kind of humanoid, but they're also quite reptilian, so I have categorised them in the reptile category, because that kind of makes the most sense for them. Although there is a potential implication that they might have actually mutated from people, so we shall get into that at some point. And then that'll be us done with all the non-human creatures. So after that, we'll take a look at the humanoid ones and some of the other kind of abominations that have developed from humans. And then last thing to talk about in terms of living animals, people, is the aliens that do occasionally crop up. So alien existence is kind of canon. So we'll be talking about them, and then we'll be getting on to some of the other kind of science side of things and the enemies, because there's a whole host of different robots and the cyber dogs and things like that. So there's lots of that kind of stuff to talk about as well. And yeah, we'll be getting into all of that. But yeah, we're nearly finished with all the creatures in Fallout, which is quite interesting. So if you've been following along for this whole journey with me, thanks a lot for your support. It's been really good, and I'm excited to bring you more random animal facts and other interesting little tidbits of lore and the like. So if you've enjoyed this and you've watched some of my videos, a wee subscribe is much appreciated. I really love the kind of support that the channel's got over the last few months. It's really exciting. I'll see you next time. Bye.